The alien ship arrived on a Tuesday, which seemed to Dr. Elena Voss like an act of profound disrespect to the moment. Tuesdays were for laundry and grocery runs, not for the end of human solitude in the universe. It did not announce itself with fire or thunder. It simply appeared in geostationary orbit above the Pacific, a shape like a folded leaf the size of Manhattan, and waited. For 6 days it waited, silent, while the world below screamed and prayed and argued about what to do with the silence. On the 7th day, it spoke. Not in radio waves, not in light. It spoke in the soil, every patch of bare earth on the planet, from the Sahara to a flower pot on a windowsill in Lisbon, arranged itself for 1/2 of 1 second into the same shape, a question mark, written in 11,000 languages simultaneously, including several that had been dead for 1,000 years, and one that humanity had not yet invented. The message beneath the symbol, translated imperfectly into every tongue at once, was this: "We have watched you for a long time. We have one question before we decide what you are. Send your answer, and we will come." The world's governments did what governments do. They formed a committee. It took 4 days of furious debate to decide who would represent humanity's response, and in the end, the choice came down not to a president or a general, but to a teacher. Her name was Amara Diallo, and she taught elementary school in a small town in Senegal where the power went out twice a week and the children walked 4 kilometers to learn. She had not been chosen for her credentials. She had been chosen because when the United Nations panel had asked the children of the world what question they would ask an alien, as a kind of desperate last-ditch sampling of the human heart, one child's answer had spread across the planet like wildfire. A boy named Ibrahima, 8 years old, had said, "Ask them if they get scared too." When pressed for an answer to send back to the ship, the committee had argued for philosophy, for mathematics, for proofs of consciousness and culture. They had drafted speeches about Shakespeare and the calculus and the pyramids of Giza. They wanted to impress. Amara Diallo, invited to speak for 10 minutes at the final session, used only 30 seconds.
"You are all trying to prove that we are clever,"
she said.
"They did not ask if we are clever. They asked what we are. I do not think you answer that question with monuments. I think you answer it with how you treat the people who have nothing to give you back."
The room was quiet for a long moment.
"Send them that,"
she said.
"Send them the boy's question, and send them this answer. Yes, we get scared, and we have never once let that stop us from opening the door anyway."
The committee, against every instinct of pride and protocol, sent her words exactly as she'd spoken them, transmitted not by radio but by the same soil writing trick the aliens themselves had used, taught to a team of frantic engineers over 48 sleepless hours. The ship descended 3 days later. It did not land with the grandeur the movies had promised humanity for 100 years. It came down quietly into a fallow field outside Amara's own village, crushing not one stalk of millet, and from it walked a single figure, tall, slender, skin like brushed pewter, eyes too large and too patient for any human face. It did not go to the United Nations. It did not go to a president. It walked, on legs that moved like a held breath, directly to the schoolhouse, and it knelt, an enormous effort, clearly, for a body not built for kneeling, in front of 8-year-old Ibrahima, who had not, in all the chaos, been told that his question had reached the stars.
"You asked if we are afraid,"
the alien said, in a voice that sounded like wind moving through a cave, in Ibrahima's own Wolof, learned from 4 days of careful study.
"We are called the Sci-Fi. We have watched 11,000 worlds rise to the edge of the stars. Of those, 4,012 burned themselves to ash before they ever left their cradle. We watch from a distance because closeness is dangerous, and we have learned at great cost that hope is the most dangerous thing of all."
It paused. The whole village had gone still, mothers with babies on their hips, old men leaning on canes, all of them watching this impossible patient creature speak to a child.
"We have asked this question of 217 worlds before yours,"
the Sci-Fi said.
"We ask because the answer tells us whether a species understands what it is building toward, or only what it is running from. Species that answer with power. We leave alone and watch and grieve. Because power without fear of itself does not last. Species that answer with fear and nothing else. We leave to their solitude, because fear without courage curdles into something worse than silence.
It looked up, past the boy, to Amara standing in the doorway of the school with her arms crossed and her heart in her throat.
You are the first to answer with both, in the same breath, as if they were never separate at all.
It said.
Fear and the refusal to let it close a door. That is not the answer of children. That is the answer of a species that has already decided, somewhere in its long and bloody history, what kind of grown thing it intends to become.
It would be years before the full weight of that day settled into history, before scholars argued over transcripts, before children memorized Amara's 30 seconds in schools on 3 new worlds, before humanity's halting steps into the dark were guided, gently and at a respectful distance, by a species that had buried 4,000 dead civilizations and had stopped just this once to make sure it wasn't about to bury one more. But Ibrahima, who grew up to become neither a diplomat nor a scientist, but simply a teacher, like the woman who had answered for all of them, would tell his own students a simpler version of the story. They didn't come because we were strong, he would say. They came because, when they asked if we were afraid, we didn't lie. We said yes, and then we told them what we did anyway, even though we were. He would let that sit a moment, the way Amara had taught him to let silence do its own kind of speaking. That, he'd say, is the only kind of brave that has ever meant anything.